Hey, how's it going everyone? It's Even Monkey here back with another build guide, and this one's for Rampaging Mad Bomber Esiemo, which has been insanely fun and hysterical. You just run around the map, taunting enemies. Every time they hit you, they get a bomb attached to them, and you just detonate all those bombs for insane damage, eliminating a wave, and every time you eliminate an enemy, you also heal, turning Esiemo into a pseudo high damage drain tank, giving you insane survivability on top of that crazy damage. Now, if you guys don't know what Rampaging Mad Bomber does, let me go up and throw it up on the screen there, pause if you need to read it. But this module is so much fun, and it's amazing for bounty operations. I have soloed it with it, it does phenomenal, and this is also onslaught ready. I've run this so many times in onslaught, it feels amazing. Not only are you pulling the aggro off your teammates, so they have higher survivability, you also just will never go down and be able to solo clear waves. It just feels phenomenal. But that's enough of me yapping. Let's go and get you guys straight into this build guide so you can get out there with Esiemo. Now, as usual, we're going to go ahead and start off with our mod section, where I'll go ahead and break down every module, why we're running it, and how it fits into the build. And starting off our mods will be our shield section, which Esiemo gains a lot of benefits from shields, but we'll explain that after we go over each of these shield modules, starting off with Increased Shield. Now, Increased Shield is your basic shield module, has no downside, and in fact there's only one module that's better than it, that's a non-Ancestor module. But the downside of that one is you only get a small amount of shield more than Increased Shield, while you lose a whole bunch of max HP, which we really actually also want max HP, thanks to our next module, which is Overwhelming Shield. Now, Overwhelming Shield has the really cool benefit of it takes your max HP and converts it to shield at a certain percentage, but that's not the only cool thing it does. That shield that Overwhelming Shield gives from your max HP is actually base shield, meaning any multiplicative increase on shields you get is also applied to this base shield we get from Overwhelming Shield. Meaning, for example, if let's just say you have 1,000 base shield and you have enough increased shield modifier to double that. So we'll say based off your multiplicative shield value, you get up to 2,000 shield. Well, if Overwhelming Shield was to give you, let's just say 3,000 additional base shield, your base shield value would then be 4,000, and based off your increased shield value doubling your shields, you would then have 8,000 shields. And if anyone's wondering, yes, that's basically how this all works. Most of your base shield value is going to come from Overwhelming Shield, where we're taking our max HP and converting it into that value. Now, speaking of HP, our next module is Stem Accelerant. Now, we're running this one because this gives you a lot of max HP, with the only downside being minus max MP, but we're willing to take that hit to our maximum MP to get a higher shield value. Now, as a quick note, there are a lot of places in this build where we'll be kind of doing a balancing act between increasing our HP to get a higher base shield value and increasing our shield modifier to get a higher multiplicative value for increasing our shields. It'll be kind of just like a fine balancing act. Now, why do we actually want so much shield on Esiemo? Well, it's kind of a fun thing. Each of his abilities scale off shield. They get up to 195% increased damage, capping out at 30,000 shield, which we are able to hit with this build. And on top of that, you get a whole bunch of survivability from shields, with your third ability giving you a buff that you get 5% of your shields back every 1 second, and your second ability, which is one you use to detonate all your bombs, so one you do a lot of damage with, gives you 5% of your shield back per enemy killed. So you will pretty much never go down with this build. You have insane survivability thanks to all the shields you get, plus all that damage. And of course, we'll be increasing our damage through other means. The next means being skill power, with our first skill power module being fire amplification. Now, we're running this one because Esiemo is a non-crit character in this build. He has very low crit rate, and there's honestly no room to fit crit anywhere in this build. So instead, we're going to take fire amplification for a massive increase in skill power, which will ramp up our damage a lot since Esiemo is a fire descendant. And then next we have Focus on Fire. Now we're running this one because we really want that cooldown. We're going to hit about 85% cooldown with this build, which is really needed so you can spam out your taunt, get a lot more bombs out, and also spam out all of your other abilities. And we're also running this because once again, Esiemo is a Fire Descendant. Now, a quick note on this module. If you want an increased damage over cooldown, swap this one out for increased power, which will just give you base increased skill power. This will help balance out your pools a lot, and thanks to the first Descendant damage formula, really ramp up your damage. Or, and we'll go over this when we get into the Ancestor Mods section of this video, if you roll cooldown on your Ancestor module, swap this one out for increased power, since you won't need the cooldown from this anymore, and the increased skill power will instead greatly ramp up your damage. Keyword though, this is only if you get cooldown your Ancestor module, which is going to be one of our top values to be able to roll. And we will also be running, of course, cooldown mods as well in this build, with the first one being Nimble Fingers. It's just your basic cooldown module, no downside, it's always a good one to run. Then we have MP Conversion. This gives you the most amount of cooldown out of any non-Ancestor module in the game, with the only downside being max MP. And yes, this will mean we'll have something like 30% minus max MP, but that's fine because it won't really affect the build at all, so we'll take that hit. Now, why are we actually running so much cooldown? Well, this is mainly just to be able to spam out your abilities more, especially your taunt. This will help you pull aggro off of your allies, so all the enemies will start looking at you. And every time your enemy hits you while your buff from your third ability is active, you get to plant a bomb on them with no cooldown. Which means you can just run to a group of enemies, throw out your third ability, which is just you flexing on them, and you'll plant instantly something like 20 bombs, if the group is large enough. And that means you can just pretty much instantly destroy the wave. This also allows you to spam out your fourth ability more, so that you can plant more bombs with your sword, and pretty much just allow you to use all of your bombs across your entire build a lot more, including your first ability as well. This will also allow us to set up Domino Drive, which we'll go into in a little bit, but this will allow us to set up that buff a lot easier. So cooldown is really essential to Esiemo, and probably the second best stat out of every stat you can get in the game. With the first stat, of course, just being skill power for more damage. So his third best stat is actually going to be skill effect range, which we're going to be running skill expansion for this. And this is because it's just your basic skill range increase module, has no downside, and in all honesty, the next best one isn't that much better, with it having only a slight further increase in range, and the downside of lowering your modifiers. So instead we'll just take the basic one, so that we don't get any lower damage, and we basically hit the same range effect. Now, why is this the third best stat on Esiemo? Well, this is because all of his abilities have insane ranges and increased range modifiers, where some of his abilities can hit the cap of range increase of 300%, and the next lowest one's 250%. Meaning you hit very wide AoEs with Esiemo, and you really want that for your taunt to be able to hit as many targets as possible. And since you're blowing up bombs, you especially want those to be able to hit as many targets as possible, increasing your DPS, and meaning you're just hitting more enemies from that. So it's just a really good stat to have. And then next up is Chain Reaction. Now Chain Reaction is going to be tied into our trigger module, Domino Drive, which we'll go over here in a minute. But basically what this does is, while you have the Domino Drive buff active, which you pretty much will have up all the time, you get a 20% damage increase across all of your damage, and this will be your final damage. Meaning if you just did, let's say, 1 million damage to that enemy, you'll do another 200,000. If you did 100 million, you'll do 20 million additional damage to it. It's just across your final damage value. It'll actually proc as a second damage number after your damage number, so this is just a really big damage increase. Increasing any damage by 20% is huge, especially when we talk about the numbers you get in first Descendant. And then of course for our Ancestor module, as usual, we'll go ahead and move that to its own section, where we'll go ahead and break down all the stats you can get in your Ancestor module and put them in a tier chart that you guys can use to reference. if your Ancestor module is good, or if you want to go ahead and re-roll it. Now, if you guys want to jump to that right now, there's a link in the description, and a timestamp in the timeline of the video itself. And now that we've finished out all of our main modules, let's go ahead and hop into our trigger module, which, as mentioned in the mod section, will be Domino Drive. And this is the one I recommend running for a few different reasons. Number one, it gives 2 stats that MSCO really wants, which is skill effect range, so you're hitting in a wider radius, and fire skill power, so you're doing more damage. As I mentioned before, these are 2 of the top 3 stats that he wants. Then the other reason is that he can stack Domino Drive really fast. Thanks to your first and your third ability having stacks, you can proc the full Domino Drive in usually about 1 to 2 seconds. And even if you can't proc the full stacks for the full buff, you can at least get the partial buff, since you're already spamming out all these abilities constantly before you're activating your second ability, which will trigger Domino Drive. Now, the other reason we really want Domino Drive is because of chain reaction. This also is a massive damage increase, which you can only run this if you have Domino Drive's buff active, and you'll pretty much permanently have that going. So getting that 20% damage across the board, including on your bombs, which is going to be the majority of your damage, is massive. Now, as a side note, I thought I'd also mention about Explosive Aesthetics, which is also a okay trigger module to run. My main issue with why Explosive Aesthetics is worse than Domino Drive is because this ties it too heavily to your 4th ability, which you're not always spamming, and it only condenses all your damage into one giant burst. Compared to Domino Drive, which increases all of your explosive damage, aka all the bombs you're constantly throwing out through taunting, your first ability, and your 4th ability, will have a massive 20% increase, and this is much more consistent damage, will help with wave clear, and even bosses, since we're just going to get flat 20% damage across the board, and we're also going to be getting increased damage through fire skill power and increased range. Overall, Domino Drive, just because of its consistent damage increase, is much better. But if you do want to run Explosive Aesthetics, just as a side note, you will need to change out Chain Reaction, and if you want to do that, I'd recommend changing it out for another range module, since once again, Mezio really wants increased range so his abilities hit further. But once again, I definitely recommend Domino Drive over Explosive Aesthetics. And finally, let's go on to our Ancestor module section, where we'll go ahead and take every stat you can roll on your Ancestor module, break them down, put them into a tier chart that you guys can use and reference to determine if your Ancestor module is good, or if you want to go ahead and re-roll it. And starting off with our best tier, which is S tier, we have Tech Skill Power Boost Ratio. Now the reason we have this one is Esiemo has 3 abilities, and his passive are all tech scaling. And that includes the bombs whenever an enemy hits you is actually your passive bombs, so it's also going to raise up that damage. Meaning this will just overall increase your damage a lot, since when you run into a wave, you taunt the whole wave, you're probably going to throw out like 10 to 20 bombs within a split second, and you detonate that and the whole wave just disappears. So it's just a really good ratio to have. Next, we have Skill Cooldown. Now, as I mentioned in the mod section, this is one of Esiemio's best stats, top 3 stats. And it's just really good to roll because not only can it get you to 90% cooldown, which is a capped out cooldown, allowing you to spam out more bombs, which means more damage, you can also, if you roll a high enough skill cooldown, remove cooldown from other places in the kit and replace it with even more damage. And throughout this video, I will point out those locations you can go ahead and remove the damage. And I already, in fact, did this in the mod section itself, with Focus on Fire being replaceable with Power Increase. I would highly recommend, if you could roll a skill cooldown, to roll it. It's just that good of a stat on Esiemo. And then our final S tier stat is going to be Fire Skill Power Boost Ratio. It's just because Esiemo is a fire character, and this will scale all of his abilities. It's just a good general stat to have. And then, going on to A tier, we have Fusion Skill Power Boost Ratio, which this is what your 4th ability scales off of. And since you will be using your 4th ability a lot to not only use its damage, but also use its buffs to apply bombs with your sword, which that also scales off fusion, those bombs, this is also another decent way to increase your damage. In fact, just as a side note, if you do want to go more of a fourth ability heavy playstyle where you're mainly using the bombs from your sword instead of the taunt bombs, you can actually put a higher priority on this over tech. But generally, I put a higher priority on tech skill power, since you're going to get a lot of the bombs from taunting entire waves. And then next we have skill effect range. As I explained in the module section, Esiemo scales really well with skill effect range since all of his abilities have insanely high modifiers, which just means you can taunt more enemies with a single taunt, and your bombs are going to have a way higher radius, which means any enemies in the increased proximity are just going to detonate and be gone. And then we also have max shield and max HP. These are for the same reason. These will increase your overall shield value, and since all of your survivability from your second ability and your third ability are percentile, you will get even more healing back, which equals more survivability. Max shield will increase your modifier, and max HP will increase your base shield value. Both are very good. And then let's go ahead and move on to our middle of the pack values, which is B tier. We have fusion skill modifier and tech skill modifier. While technically both of these do increase your damage, since all of our scalings are over 1,000, these don't really impact it much, so it'll only be a slight increase in damage. That's why these are much lower than anything in S tier or A tier. And then as usual, we have defense in B tier. It's just a good standard value. There's nothing wrong with it. It increases your survivability. It's just other values do that more, and other values also increase your damage. So this is just a good middle of the pack value as usual. And then going on to C tier. Now C tier are kind of values you just want to avoid, because they don't really help the build too much if you take them as a positive, but they do kind of hurt the build if you take them as negative. And they kind of have the same logic here with skill cost and max MP. While you do spam pretty heavily with this build, you generally can keep your mana costs within reason and keep up with them, so you don't really have to worry about it too much. But if you were to take these as a negative, you technically would increase the cost so much that you probably wouldn't be able to keep up with these. And if you do end up having MP issues at all, we'll talk about this in the component sets. There is a way to compensate for that to where you can fix that. But generally you won't have any MP cost issues at all. And then finally, our last tier is going to be D tier. Now, this tier is a tier that none of these stats really benefit the build much at all. In fact, it's very little to none at all. And they hurt the build also very little to none at all. So these are perfect stats if you want to take these as a negative. Now, starting off with skill duration up, the reason why this one is here is because even though we do technically have a couple things that scale off duration from the buff from our fourth ability and our third ability, it won't really impact it much, since the buff from our fourth ability, which allows us to plant up to 15 bombs on an enemy through sword attacks, really won't be affected by duration, because we do have a way that we'll talk about when we get to our weapons section that you can very quickly plant all the bombs from that buff. And then for your third ability, the buff you get massively has more duration than the cooldown, and you're going to be spamming out that cooldown. So it doesn't really matter. And the taunt from your third ability, even though yes, this will technically cut it shorter, you're probably going to kill any enemy that's taunted way before the taunt ends. So we don't really care about lowering that taunt duration. And then our next two stats are going to be skill critical hit rate and skill critical hit damage. As I explained in the mod section, Esiemo is not going to use any crit in this build, so we can just get rid of these because we don't use them. And for reference, if anyone wants to know what an ideal Ancestor module would look like for this build, it would be something along the lines of tech skill power boost ratio, skill cooldown, fire skill power boost ratio, all positive, and with a negative skill critical hit rate. That way that your three positives would have even higher values. And that is what an ideal one would look like. But hopefully this tier chart will help you guys determine if your Ancestor module is good, or if you want to go ahead and re-roll it. And with all of our mod sections out of the way, let's go ahead and hop into our Arche Tree. And for this one, we're going to want to focus on a few things. The first is, we really want to hit that mutant cell in the top right hand corner there. There's a couple mutant cells here that we'll go over in a minute. They're really nice to run. And we also want that gold cooldown node That's so that we can get that 85% cooldown that we really want. Once again, Esiemo really wants cooldown to be able to spam out all of his abilities. And then, of course, we also want to go at the bottom of the tree here. We want that increased max HP. Once again, that'll add to our base shields. And then we also want the increased shield node all the way at the bottom there. That will increase our shields by a lot. And between these two, they'll help with us hitting that 30k max shield that we want to hit for the maximum damage increase and for a lot of survivability. Now, the Mutant Cells you're going to want to run for this, there are actually two different options that you can run here. So the first one is called Fire Chain Catalyst. This is one's really good for more in-game content. You lower the enemy's resistance, and while you already do lower the enemy's resistance through your third ability, debuffing enemies, this will allow you to lower it even further, which is really good, because that will allow us to do a lot more damage. The other option is Exploding Gun Cache. Now, this one's really good because you get stacking fire skill power from using destruction type abilities, which your first and your fourth ability, which you'll be spamming out plenty, are type destruction. So you're able to stack this relatively easily and keep the stacks going while playing Esiemo. And now let's move on to the component set of this build. Now this is going to be a little bit unusual. Instead of running a full 4 set, we're instead going to run two sets, where we're going to run the 2 set of Hunter for the cooldown and the 2 set for Enlightened Mage for a bit more damage. Because don't forget, Esiemo's top 3 stats are damage, cooldown, and range. So we're going to take the two sets to get 2 of these 3 favorite stats. Now, there are a few notes that I need to make here. First off, you guys need to take the exact components I have shown on the screen there. This is because this will give you the max amount of shield possible. If you change up the order, you'll get less shield. So with this, you'll have over 31,000 shield without the Inversion Reinforcement buff. And if you run a different combo, you'll get at least 1,000 less shield, which isn't that much, but it is less survivability. Another note I want to make here is that if you are running into MP issues at all, which is completely possible since you will be spamming pretty heavily in this build, swap to Hunter set. Just run the full 4 set. That will fix your MP issues entirely, since part of that set is you need to get hit, and don't forget you're constantly taunting with this build. So it's really easy to proc, and that'd fix any MP issues you could possibly have. But generally you won't run into any MP issues. That is just in case you do. And the last note I want to make is about Distorted set. I know a lot of people have talked about with running with Esiemo. It is useless in this build. Mainly because everything that you'd want, we pretty much already have, with the only real benefit giving you is the 14 to 15% increased skill power. And if we wanted that type of skill power when you take the set for that, we would just run Slayer set, which gives even more skill power. And some people may be wondering, well, what about the 15% shield heal every 15 seconds? Well, that's kind of just like a drop in the bucket, because don't forget your third ability is healing you for 5% every 1 second, and your second ability is healing you for 5% for every enemy you kill. So 15% every 15 seconds isn't that much. It's actually fairly insignificant. And then the last thing about Distorted set is that little bit of damage it does is only 4% of your skill power as additional damage. And that's also a drop in the bucket, considering that we have scalings in the thousands. A 4% scaling is insignificant. So Distorted does not really work too well with this set. So instead, run 2 Enlightened and 2 Hunter, or the full 4 Hunter set. Now, for your substats you're going to want here. You're going to want max HP, MP recovery out of combat, MP recovery in combat, max MP, MP recovery modifier, defense, shield recovery modifier, and max shield. These will all be really helpful to build, so you want to take them all. And then for the component cores, you're going to want 2 max HP and 2 max shields. Don't forget, we're playing kind of a balancing game with increasing our max shields through the max shield modifier, and increasing our max shield through increasing its base HP by increasing max HP. And this will help you hit the max shield value by running 2 and 2 here. And then for your other 4 cores, you can just go ahead and run 4 defense. It's just generically good. If you are fighting any specific element, you can swap out 2 of those cores for elemental resistance. And next up is our Inversion Reinforcement. Now for this one, we'll be running Spatial Dominance, so we get that increased skill effect range that we really want. Arche Synergy, which has a really cool effect that HP orbs, the ones that heal you off the ground, also heal max shield, which will be a lot of survivability, which is really good. And then finally, we'll be running Rage Burst. This gives you stacking max shield, which is really good, and it's just more survivability. And for the reactor of this build, we'll be running a Fire Tech Reactor. And it's because Esiemo is a Fire Descendant, and most of your abilities scale off tech. In fact, the only ability that does not scale off tech is your 4th ability. Now, as a quick note, if you are going a more 4th ability heavy focused build or playstyle, it is perfectly fine to swap this out with a Fire Fusion Reactor, which would benefit your 4th ability more, including the bombs from your 4th ability's buff. But every other bomb does scale off tech, and for wave clear and boss killing, usually that does more damage. Now, for your substats, what you're going to want to run here is tech skill power and skill cooldown. Now, as a quick note about the skill cooldown, as discussed in the Ancestor module section, if you do roll a high enough cooldown stat on your Ancestor module, I would recommend swapping out the skill cooldown for something like Fire Skill Power or Fusion Skill Power. So once again, this is only if you roll cooldown on your Ancestor module section. Otherwise, skill cooldown and tech skill power are going to be your best stats here. And now time for the weapons of the build, which are actually pretty important. But since the weapons are not the main focus of this build video, we're not going to go super in depth like we did for Esiemo's build. Instead, I will show the builds on the screen so you guys can go ahead and copy those and explain the logic of why we're running each weapon. With our first one being Shadow. Now this one actually has some really interesting logic of why we're running this one in particular. So the main logic is it has 3 red core slots, which allows us to get triple additional attack chance, which might seem overkill, but that's because of a really interesting interaction with Emesio's 4th ability buff, the one that allows you to plant bombs with your sword, and additional attack chance. So it turns out, each time you trigger additional attack chance, it plants 1 additional bomb. So normally, if you swing your melee, just a normal sword, you would plant 1 bomb. But if you trigger, let's just say, additional attack chance 1 time, that one swing, instead of planting 1 bomb, plants 2 bombs. And for this, Shadow will get over 200% additional attack chance. So that means after you proc the first additional attack chance, because you have another 100% over the initial 100%, it guarantees procs it again. In fact, we're actually running something like 220-ish additional attack chance, which means you have a chance to actually plant 4 bombs. So whenever you swing with Shadow here, you will guarantee to plant 3 to 4 bombs out of the 15 bombs you get from your buff for your 4th ability. Now, why is this so significant? Well, that's because instead of taking 15 swings with your sword to plant all 15 bombs from your 4th ability buff, instead, it takes 5, meaning we've cut the time it takes to plant all those bombs to 1/3 of its original time, which is huge. That's going to massively increase our DPS and allow us to deal with waves even faster, or bosses or elites. Pretty much, we're just increasing our DPS here. And that's why we really want Shadow here. The other benefit is Shadow also swings fairly fast, has pretty fast attack speed. Meaning between the mixture of these two things, Shadow becomes our ideal sword. Now the next weapon we're going to go over is Deus Ex. Now, while Shadow is going to be your main weapon, it is impact rounds, so it has limited ammo. And in case you do run out of ammo, you can just swap over Deus Ex, because Deus Ex also has 3 red core slots, meaning it can do the exact same thing Shadow can, but it has a lower attack speed, So Shadow is better than Deus Ex, but Deus Ex is an amazing backup sword, so we're basically just going to do the exact same thing we did on Shadow, both Deus Ex. Same logic, but this is just a backup sword in case you run out of impact rounds. And then our final weapon, this one's going to be a little bit unusual, so we're going to run Seer Garden. Now, just for reference, you do not need any build for Seer Garden here. In fact, you only need one core, and that's going to be weapon swap speed. And even that's not needed. It just makes it feel a lot more smooth. So the reason why we're running Seer Garden here is because when you want to stack up Domino Drive, you want to have a gun out. Because if you're aiming down the sights of your gun, or you have a melee weapon out, you shoot out all 3 stacks of your first ability at once, instead of one individually at a time. And so for Domino Drive, we really just want to shoot out one at a time to be able to stack it really quickly. So we use Seer Garden to do that. And the reason why we're using Seer Garden is because since you have a lot of tech abilities, you also have the chance to increase your your normal skill power through using tech abilities. And this will just help when you activate your second ability to proc Domino Drive to potentially get slightly more increased damage for that one time. And now time finally for the tips and tricks section, where I'll show you guys a few things kind of help you along with playing Esiemo. So the first thing I want to show you guys was just summon an enemy. So if you want max shields, you need to have an enemy that you taunt. It has to be within your taunt range, and you can see that gives you 150% more shield. You'll usually have this buff up, but I just want to show you guys how to get that. Then, next up, I already have Domino Drive fully stacked. I'm going to show you guys how to get maximum damage out of your bombs. So first, let's go ahead and activate this. So if you want maximum damage, you can see the little counter on your second ability there. It'll get fully highlighted when you have 5 bombs, and that's because if you get 5 bombs, it does max damage. You guys can see there's about 25 million damage for 1 bomb, while having 5 out. With a singular bomb though, you guys can see 1 down to 11. So if you want max damage, always try to have at least 5 bombs out. It does increase per bomb, but caps out at 5. Anything above 5 will still only do as much as 5. But each additional bomb from 1 to 5 does go up scaling in damage. The next thing I want to show you guys real quick was I want to show you guys the thing I was talking about with additional hit chance. So we'll get the buff from our 4th ability here. Okay, now you can see there's 15 stacks there. If we hit once with Hypernova, 2 times, even a 3rd time, you can see each strike only added 1 additional bomb. Let's detonate that. Go ahead and reset our bomb count. Now if we do it with Shadow, if we hit once, you can see there was 3, we hit again, well actually 3 times. You can see we planted 9 bombs instantly, only with 3 strikes, tripling the efficiency. And this works with all additional chance, and this is why we want to run it. And the final thing I want to show you guys was, as you're swinging your sword, you actually can plant your first ability there. As you can see, I'm just throwing on the ground. That's just one little cool thing. It doesn't have any animation, so you can plant it while you're swinging or using your 4th ability's passive here. Just allowing you to do a lot more bomb stacks. And that's going to go ahead and wrap up for the Esiemo Build Guide, which has been a lot of fun to run. And honestly, that caught me off guard because I wasn't too certain after his ultimate launch / rework if he was going to be that enjoyable, but he has been an absolute blast to play. I've been loving this build, and it's really great in onslaught and bounties. But let me know what you guys think of the build down in the comments below, or if you have any questions, also hit me up down below as well. And if you guys did enjoy the video, or you plan to use the build, I'd appreciate you hitting that like button. It helps out the video a lot. Also, if you want to be notified when new videos are coming out, don't forget that subscribe button. And I do stream most days on Twitch. I'll go ahead and throw up the information on the screen there. I've been loving this patch. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm excited for the next content they're going to release. But once again, if you guys could hit that like button, I really would appreciate it. It does help the video get out to a lot more people. And that's going to go ahead and wrap up for this video. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll catch y'all again next time.